Welcome to the Authentically Successful Show. I'm Carol Schultz, founder and CEO of Vertical Elevation, a talent equity and leadership coaching and advisory firm. Listen at the end of the show for information about becoming my next guest on one of the most important podcasts for building thriving companies. Here we go. Joining me today is Dave Milliken, founder and CEO of Greetly. Dave founded Greetly in 2014. They're a fully customizable visitor management system serving enterprise and SMB clients across the globe. Their digital receptionist app saves time and money by modernizing its customers' receptionist capabilities, by managing their visiting customers, vendors, and interview candidates, as well as package and food deliveries, facility tours, secured facility entry and exit, and more. From instant visitor notifications and collecting e-signatures to printing visitor badges, Greetly can be customized to the branding and unique receptionist needs for every work environment. In fact, Greetly's solutions are used by several well-known brands, including DHL, Office Evolution, the United States Air Force, the Dallas Cowboys, and Randstad. Dave, that's a lot. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I look forward to speaking with you today.
Yeah, me too. Did I hit all the high points? What else would you like to fill in about your company?
Wow, you definitely hit some of the high points. It's always nice to remember our client list and how much work we've achieved to land things like the U.S. Air Force and Randstad, one of the world's biggest recruiting firms. It's really great that it's really great to have those experiences.
Right. So tell me a little bit about, you founded the company, as I mentioned, in 2014. Tell me a little bit about your journey to where you are, to founding this company, the impetus behind it, the genesis of it.
Yeah, certainly not a linear path. Certainly was not the obvious next step for me. So if you go back to that time, I'd actually spent over 15 years in consumer goods marketing. So I'd worked on brands like Blue Moon and Coors Light and Smashburger and Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy. And during that part of my career, that long part of my career, I'd been in and out of like literally several dozen professional services firms that were my partners and vendors, ranging from ad agencies to media buyers, PR, accounting, legal, etc. And one of the things that they almost all universally have in common is they spend a lot of time and money and brain power trying to build their offices in a way that impress us, their clients. And yet at the same time, they almost universally have a terrible reception experience. There's either no receptionist or a junior account person is sitting there waiting for us. And you walk in and you basically just start walking around and disturbing people or whatever it takes. And so being someone who spent a lot of time doing technology for these consumer goods companies, I thought that I could put the two together. So I basically took my marketing career, my technology interest, and I solved a direct need for some of my previous partners.
So how did that prepare you to be a CEO?
Well, it did and it didn't. So. Okay. On the one hand, I'd managed teams of people that reported into me. I'd managed teams of cross-functional teammates. I'd operated P&L. I've been responsible for making sure that a product is built in a manner that solves users' needs, whether they're stated or under the radar needs. So in a lot of ways, it did help. On the other hand, there are also all kinds of new experiences. So managing people in a corporate environment is quite different than managing them in a small environment. There's different resources and different expectations. Managing a P&L when you essentially have known resources and know how to go and get more if you need them versus, well, where is the next dollar going to come from? And and do we have to make decisions on a short-term ROI basis? So in a lot of ways, it was extremely helpful in being prepared. In some ways, it didn't help at all, and had to jump in and do it. And honestly, I love both elements of it.
So what would you say are some of the mistakes that you've made along that road to leading a team of people and building?
Yeah, I would. Great question. So I would say that again, I do think that that how you lead people in a big corporate environment is a little bit different. In a big corporate environment, you might have there's a natural rotation. So with a larger organization, Your supervisor's going to move. You're going to move. Your people who work for you are going to move just on a basis. And when you balance out that maybe those moves happen every 18 to 24 months, and there's 10 people involved, well, that's a pretty regular amount of rotation. Also, there's an element too where, sure, maybe someone reports into me, but there's also this bigger corporate structure around it. So it's not like, hey, I'm going to go crazy one day and just fire someone and that's the decision and it's made. There's resources around it, but also there's expectations. So I don't necessarily write a job description and I don't develop all the criteria. The success criteria comes from above and around, and there's third parties that pull on it within the organization. Where in a small organization, that relationship could last a lot longer, and and exactly what responsibilities and roles are really one-on-one between employee and supervisor, and how success is measured, and there aren't some of those competing and pulling resources. So knowing that you have to be, there's less to pull from to define how that relationship works, and you have to be more hands-on and make sure things are extremely clear for all parties is definitely some of the differences that I found.
You're privately held, at this stage. Have you taken any institutional capital, or are you bootstrapping?
We have not taken outside capital. We have grown this from zero to all those amazing global clients that you mentioned earlier, entirely on a bootstrapped financial capital plan.
And how many customers do you have right now, since you mentioned that?
Yep, we have about 1,000 active licenses from several hundred clients.
Okay, that's fantastic. And you've got about 12 employees. So I'm curious. You've been in business about 7 years. You've only got 12 employees. You've got a good number of customers. Have you thought about institutional capital? Have you gotten where you are now? Is it taking longer than you would have liked it to? What's your thinking on that?
I think the answer to all of those questions is yes, but I guess I'll dive in a little bit more than that. We definitely thought about it at different steps of the way. And as I look back, and we would have been, I am confident that we would be a lot bigger had we raised institutional capital, but I'm not sure that we would necessarily, it would have been worth it. I'm not so sure that we could have used that capital efficiently. So when you work in a small business, you are constantly the market, in an emerging high-tech marketplace. The market, our clients' needs, who our client is, who are we in the consideration set against, what technologies are the alternatives. That's changed a lot over that period of time. And I think if we had raised capital as recently as 2 years ago and said, hey, we're going to grow really fast by going after this market, we would have gained more customers, but I'm not so sure that that it would have had a material effect on our valuation, because we might be bigger, but we would have spent a lot of capital to get there. So that's why we haven't really gone out and raised it. I think a lot of tech companies, a lot of startups look at raising capital as a rite of passage. And for us, we never really thought it brought more shareholder value. We never saw a business plan where it clearly brought more shareholder value. And so we haven't gone out and done it. Now, we do look at it a little bit differently today. We have some incredible opportunities in front of us. We have exclusivity on sole source rights to sell some stuff into the defense industry and the federal government. We think that applies to the enterprise commercial marketplace in a way that maybe our competitors aren't seeing it. So once again, we're considering that, but it historically has not been the right path for us.
So what's sort of the layout of your employee base? Like are most people worker bees, or do you have an executive team? What does that look like?
Yep. We have a small executive team that focuses on obviously myself, operations, a CTO, and someone who's looking at the commercial market, sales and marketing.
Okay.
And then we have, and then we have obviously a small team of developers, which we supplement with third-party resources, marketing, sales, and success teams as well.
Customer success, right?
Yep.
Do you have a board, directors or advisors?
We have mostly informal. We have a small formal board of directors, and we have additional informal advisors. Yes.
Okay. And what is their interest or the benefit to them to be there?
So on the advisor side, what the way we set it up is, as a company, we have some informal advisors, but I've also suggested to myself, of course, and to the rest of the leadership team that they go get their own that aren't necessarily directly affiliated. So they're people with both functional and personal interest in assisting the people in the leadership team.
Interesting. Very interesting. You mentioned some of your customers, and I know that you just received actually some interesting news from the Air Force. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, we've had a lot going on with the U.S. Air Force. They tapped us about 2 years ago to help them digitize and modernize some of the processes for entering Air Force bases, or installations as they typically refer to them. And we built a prototype for them. Simultaneously, they've come back to us in the last month or so, and they said, one, we like this prototype. We want to implement it and pilot it at a series of bases. And two, we want to do some additional research and development partnered with Greetly to expand the functionality of that exact prototype that we're about to start piloting. So we've got a combination of both more R&D with our partners at the Air Force, and we're about to get real-time usage and experience and data to start implementing this. So this is really exciting times for us.
That's fantastic. So, looking at the problem that you're solving, that we've talked about it for your customers, what is this? What's the benefit to them? Is it an ROI? Is it a better user experience for them? What is that?
Sure. If I were to go back in time and kind of in the early stages here, it was a better experience. It was a better experience for employees. Whether they were the person who sat near the door that, was constantly handling someone else's pizza or delivery or visitors and had nothing to do with them and just simply made them less productive and stay longer. It was a better experience for visitors who, maybe they wanted to speak to a receptionist like it's the 70s still, but often people want to help themselves and they want to, really they're there to conduct business and they just want to get in contact with the person who they're conducting business with. I would say those are still very relevant, but they're not the primary reasons that these larger entities are working with Greetly. The reason that they're using Greetly is they have measured the cost of their human capital. And they know that if someone is doing this, then they're not doing something else. And they know whether that something else is more valuable. They also want to and need to secure their workplace. So that might mean that they make sure that someone who's not wanted is not on site. They have data around who came. It allows them to maintain regulatory or internal compliance. So it really is around, we run a secure workplace. Not anyone can get past that reception desk or through that first locked door. And this is a system to ensure that they have the right data, the right information, the right decision-making tools to know what is happening real time, what has happened in the past, and how to make sure everything is as needed going forward.
You talk about that you sell into the enterprise as well as SMB, which is a very large, that really pretty much is everybody. Do you have a sweet spot?
Yeah, our sweet spot is enterprise players, typically in manufacturing, logistics, tech workplaces, whether that's offices or data centers. That's really the sweet spot of our business.
Yeah, interesting. You also mentioned, you talked about your competitors. What is the competitive landscape look like in your business?
Sure.
And where do you fit in?
Yeah, well, broadly, the competitive set is any way that you might do visitor management. So it might be that you have nothing. It might be that you do have a full-time dedicated receptionist. Oftentimes it's that you have someone with split duties. Maybe they're an office manager or another, junior HR person, and they kind of double as a receptionist. In the technology world, there's a couple of pieces. There's some highly manual technology. So these enterprise secure workplaces, typically they might have a receptionist and or a security guard that's running desktop, what I might call legacy software. Can I see your ID? Can I maybe take a picture of you? Someone's literally running that software. So we replace that in a lot of cases because it's self-help, but has all the same functionality. And then there's some other tablet-based providers in our competitive set as well. So that is, it's kind of a broad look at who we compete with. The reason we win is incredible customization. So from a branding standpoint, from a workflow standpoint, really whatever you want this to look like, however you need this to work to meet the achieves of what happens at your reception desk really is incredibly customizable and can achieve that. And again, we're security driven. So our data security uses best in class. We're based in the US, which, for some people in Europe, maybe that's not the best, but for a lot of organizations, that means that their data is stored where they want it to be. It means that, we're not doing nefarious activities with their data. So from a security standpoint, we keep your workplace secure, both on-site and your data as well.
So let's go back to the U.S. Air Force here for a second. They probably don't want just anybody wandering onto their base. I have experienced that going into the Air Force Academy personally, where they have guards. You can't, you need a badge or you need something to get onto the Air Force Academy. But with their bases, what I'm wondering about is anybody getting on that doesn't already have an appointment?
There should not be. So to get on a base,
so there's a check. There's a check, a security check. So they'll know when you go to to Greetly that this person has an appointment to print out a badge.
So to get on an Air Force base, and I believe that this is true across the defense industry and pretty much every secure federal government facility, you need a sponsor. So you might have a sponsor who says this person is coming on Tuesday at 3 p.m., or you might have a sponsor that says this person is coming from Tuesday at 9 a.m. until 60 days later or 90 days later, and they can come and go as they need.
Got it.
Someone does need to have that. But once that sponsor says, yes, this person is someone that I want on base or need on base or is approved to be on base, they do run a series of processes that are checks and balances against that. So are you, does your criminal background or history match what they approve to have on base?
Right.
Sex offender, are you specifically not wanted on that or other bases because of activities that maybe don't show up in those databases? Are you a known potential spy, et cetera? So there's a bunch more that happens. When you show up, you're basically at the last step of a lot of background execution that has happened beforehand.
Well, that's super interesting. Is there any sort of particular outdated advice in this industry that some people might be giving out?
Typically the outdated advice is, great question. I was on with a potential very large prospect yesterday, and they gave the advice of, well, we're a hospitality driven organization. So we so our visitors want to speak to a human.
Yeah, I get it.
I typically, I think that there's a lot of truth to that is what it comes down to. Organizations do want to be hospitality driven, but, they want to separate themselves from the competition by being hospitality driven. But the question is, does hospitality driven mean that that your visitors always want to speak to a human, so that you have a human so that they can address any needs? Some visitors, I think of my father-in-law, super gregarious, always wants to come in and chat with anyone who's in sight. He definitely wants to talk to the receptionist before he uses self-help.
Yeah.
But a lot of other people don't. They simply don't. They, in a COVID era or not, they don't want to have a conversation, whether it's because they're introverted or because they're focused on something else at the moment they check in. They just want to do it themselves. They want to be fast. They want to sit anonymously. So ultimately, our argument would be that a great hospitality-driven organization offers both. They offer someone that's there for people who want it, for exception handling, and they offer self-help for people who want to be quick, people who don't want just idle chit-chat. So, but that is the outdated advice is organizations that believe that the only way to do it is to have a human dedicated towards its function.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So who would you say is your ideal client, and is there an ideal client? And then are you connecting with them? Are they connecting with you, or is it a combination of both?
So I would say when I think about our ideal client, one that comes to mind is a gaming group, so a casino group. They use us to get into their back of house. So obviously you don't need to use it to get into the hotel. You don't need it to get into the gaming floor, of course. But if you want to go into the back of house where they, I don't know exactly what's back there, but I presume there's a lot of cash and a lot of servers and a lot of other things that they consider extremely valuable.
Yes, I would agree.
Across their multiple casinos. Mm-hmm. Everyone has to check in, including employees. So employees and known contractors can either check in the way a visitor would, or they can also scan their badge. We'll read it, interpret it, and check in. They need to know every entry and exit. And visitors as well. Visitors will check themselves in. All kinds of activities will happen. It's that we tie all entry and exit records to a security guard who's on duty at that entry point at that point in time. And the reason I consider this an ideal client is that what they're doing this for is largely to protect their assets, but also that they need to be regulatorily compliant. So at any moment in time, across casinos and across entry points, they might be asked to turn in who has been there and a period of time. And in the old days, they would use different systems at different properties, and they'd have to aggregate that and do a lot of work to put them into one format and send it over. And now they can do it in about 30 seconds. They can basically run a saved report, meet their compliance needs. It saves everyone time. It makes them look good to the agencies. Again, we keep their workplace secure. So, that's what I would consider an ideal client. Almost all of our business has historically been inbound. So we are very findable for almost anything that you might think about regarding secure visitor management or the visitor experience. And we've had clients in 6 continents and about 25 countries, using Greetly in about 30 different languages. Find us almost entirely through an inbound marketing process.
Really, that's really interesting. What's the sales cycle look like? And can you say, and are you even willing to say, like, what an average deal size is?
Well, we don't get that level of specifics in terms of dollars and cents, but the sales cycle for us, we do like to do this on a hospitality basis. And so we've tried different things. We've tried Find Us, launch a trial, and it's an entirely self-help process. And there's a lot of benefits to that, but we now strongly encourage a demo. And the reason we do this is, one, it allows us to understand our clients and our prospects and their business a little bit more and customize solutions. But with all the customization that is built into our product, again, in terms of branding and workflow customization, reporting customization, where with a trial, you might spend a few days, a few hours tinkering around and maybe or maybe not getting it to work exactly as you need. With a demo in about 15 minutes, we can hear what your business is all about, your organization is all about, and we can hand over to you something that's basically somewhere between 80 and 100% of exactly what you need to operate your visitor experience. And so that's what we typically look like for a process. Honestly, oftentimes we'll close right on the demo, but sometimes it's it could take a couple of weeks after that for different types of pilots or approvals or whatever it might be.
Well, and I would think to your example of a large casino group, I can't imagine them making that kind of a decision in a 15-minute demo call.
That did not go exactly that way. That was actually through an RFP process and a response and a long on-site experience and possibly the longest part of that process was contracting. That was always fun. I always liked spending time with my lawyer. Super nice group. But yeah, that one certainly was longer. Okay. But to be honest, really not that long. Probably soup to nuts. It was probably only about an 8-week process.
Which is still a really, comparatively to, when you're thinking about enterprise software. Yeah, that does not usually happen that fast.
Yeah, so they're really good. They're buying a lot of things all the time, which again, a lot of enterprise companies are, but specifically in casinos, basically enterprise software is almost everything that runs that casino, including the slot machines and obviously security. So they have in this case, they happen to know their process. They said a lot, probably more than half of the time was spent in the contracting process, but going through, showing them that this could solve their need. The onboarding process of setting it up and configuring it for all their casinos exactly as they needed it. For us, that's our bread and butter, and so we do that all day, every day, and it was quite fast and simple.
Looking ahead 12 months from now, Dave, would you say that what are you looking at from a projected growth standpoint, employee standpoint?
Yeah, well, we've on a revenue standpoint, we've doubled every year of our existence. So
Right.
I would expect that there's an opportunity to do that, or potentially more. I mean,
Okay.
the gravy, so to speak, is going to depend on exactly how aggressive the Air Force gets with implementing this. We've spoken with about a dozen bases and have letters of support from virtually all of them. But our contacts, our main points of contact, are saying that it could be bigger than that, faster than that. And so there's a lot of, for small businesses, working through just simply how you do business with the Air Force. That is a two-way street.
Right.
We're learning it on them, and they're learning it about us. And our main points of contact think that that really, once we get through a short pilot phase, this could explode from their usage.
That's fantastic. Are you I'm just kind of curious about this. Are you on any of our local bases here in Colorado, since we have so many of them?
We do have quite a few. We are used, a part of our solution is used at Schriever, the home of Space Command, down east of Colorado Springs. So we're in use there. They use a piece of our solution. We're also in use, so not in Colorado, in the Tahoe area. And Beale is already using a part of our solution. We have 2 or 3 other bases that are going to do a quick start. And then the heavier duty solution, we're looking at 3 to 5 bases starting in early 2022.
Fantastic. So what does that mean, like for an employee growth for you? You're getting a lot of this business done.
We've projected this out many times. I would expect that our employee base would probably match what revenue growth looks like, largely on the dev side. So both product development, DevOps, technical support. So kind of the tier 3 and 4 support, not interfacing with the users necessarily, but making sure that we have the technology to resolve things quickly. That would be that's what we've projected out. Is it approximately matches revenue. Historically, we've been generally on track looking at it that way, but I also know that all forecasts are guaranteed to be wrong. So we'll just find out how it's wrong over time.
Forecasts are guaranteed to be wrong. What's your sales organization look like? Is it like an organization of one, or?
No, we have, in addition to our chief strategy office who oversees all commercial efforts.
Sure.
We have a couple of account managers. And in a lot of cases, they're set up to oversee a client's experience from the first time they express any interest in our product, as long as they're with us. That's what we like to be, the first point of support. But of course, there are times when they turn that over to our success team for additional needs.
Yeah, that's interesting. If somebody was, just looking at this industry thinking, I'd like to get into a business like that, is there any advice you would give them? Do you be willing to divulge?
That's a good question. I don't know how to answer that question. Okay. I'd have to really think about that. It might take either a couple of really great green teas or whiskeys before I came up with anything insightful there.
Well, maybe the green teas first, then the whiskeys. Or depending on what kind of creativity you want to have, right?
Man, that's a really good question. I don't even know how to go about that. I think I would give the same advice I would give, coming from a corporate world, and starting a company. My first few years was littered with nonstop meetings with people saying, "Hey, I'm also looking to start my own company." From people from my consumer goods background.
Sure.
And I don't know of anyone who actually did. Yeah. And maybe I'm the cause of that, because I would typically tell people it looks easy. You've seen the movie The Social Network. It seems glamorous. Yeah. Oh, you're going to ski every time there's a powder day or whatever it is. You're really on your own schedule.
Yeah, right.
And that's not even remotely true. You work harder than ever. Yeah. Whenever being all evers.
Yeah.
So I think my advice on this field in particular is my advice on it's a lot harder than it looks. You got to have a real passion for what you're doing and a dedication. I was really I started this because I saw people who I consider my friends, in my professional network, people that I'd worked really closely with for years, and I looked at their business and I said, look, I'm not going to be their creatives, I'm not going to be their accountants. But I see something that could make their businesses better. And I started this for them. And as the opportunity came to solve a big need to help the Air Force and our defense industry focus on defending our country as opposed to the current processes they have in place, which is error prone and takes an incredible amount of manpower. I rebuild that passion. I can really help this large organization do one of the many things they do so much more efficiently that I believe they can do all the other things they do more efficiently through what we do here. So it takes a lot of time and a lot of passion, whether it's this or anything else that you want to start from scratch, from 0 to 1, as Peter Thiel said. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, there's no question about that. So,
as you know very well, and
yes,
you're living right this moment.
Yeah, exactly. So, do you foresee at any time, as I'm listening to you talk about calling into DoD, right? Most software companies have separate salespeople that have some sort of clearance to go in and sell to DoD, right? Versus the guys who just call into commercial that do not need that kind of background.
It depends on how far down the road. So as painful as it can be to work with the DoD, they do have the SBA has programs, and they are set up to make exceptions for small businesses.
I did not know that.
Yes. So the SBA with the 12 largest federal agencies have some processes in place that make it so it's not completely impossible for us to work with them. But that will only last so long. So there will be a point in time when we surpass that. So in the short term, we're able to do it. I'm able to do a lot of it as the founder, and our team. Some of our team is able to between commercial and government. At any point in time over the course of a day or a week or a month or whatever it might be. But yes, we're heading down the path where we'll have people who are dedicated towards the government side of the business and other people dedicated towards the commercial side, and a lot less crossover. I don't know exactly when that'll be, but that is definitely the future.
Very great. So what does your day-to-day look like as a leader, Dave? What do you spend your time doing?
What I spend most of my time doing is what I like spending my time doing, which is meeting with staff. Obviously, we're in a COVID world. Some of our teammates are, coast to coast, so I don't get to do it in person. But I spend, everyone that I can meet with in person, I go to lunch with them or breakfast, their choice. Not a morning person. As often as possible in person, and with everyone else, I like to carve out 30 to 45 minute just check-ins and talk about things that are not necessarily work related. Understand them, what motivates them, why they are here, how I can help them, and just kind of pick their brains for ideas as much as possible. When I'm not speaking with people on our team, I love speaking with customers. I love just kind of dipping in and listening into our account managers give demos and just hear what prospects are saying, joining in on support meetings and hearing what's being said. I just kind of love hearing what are the use cases, what are the needs, why did they contact us this particular time or in general, how they see the market potentially evolving. So I'd love just kind of dealing with people basically is what I spend most of my time doing and what I enjoy doing the most as well.
How would you describe your culture?
Great question as well. It's been tough. So we were a small kind of fighter group of people when we operated in person. And I think that that's still kind of in place today, but it's hard to get a real read on it. We do have our cultural values. And again, we bring them up and we try and implement them where possible, but going from in-person, largely in person to remote and then scattered around the country as COVID's hit us. It's just harder to get a feel of how attached people are to it today versus a couple of years ago when that was easier.
Well, have you done any kind of active reach out to ask them how they feel?
Well, that is a lot of my kind of these one-on-one meetings that I have with members of the team. It's hard. It's I could see it in action sometimes a little bit more when things are happening in person. So I feel pretty good about it. Yeah. But it's also hard to it's hard to get as great a read as I had in the past.
Yeah. What kind of, if any, turnover have you had due to maybe a mishire on culture, you realize, oh yeah, this person doesn't fit at all?
Sure, it certainly happened, unfortunately. For us, the times that this happened, it's been really, really fast.
Yeah.
We are extremely deliberate in how we write job descriptions. We describe our culture. We put our cultural values in there. We describe exactly what metrics we're going to use to determine whether a candidate's done a good job.
Great.
And we've had a couple of people who have started and within 2, 3, 4 weeks have said, oh, you like really meant that thing. Well, I don't really know how to do that.
Oy.
And work with them to see, can we find a mentor for you? Do you have people you can tap into? And it's either worked or not worked, but it's often been extremely quick.
Yeah. And have you then been able to look back and think, okay, so we made this mistake. What do we need to do differently to prevent that from happening again?
Yeah, so we've had some success in understanding ourselves a little bit better in some cases, and in other cases we've determined that it takes a different approach. Either we're asking for something that's not out there, either at the compensation that we have, or the company size that we have, the ability to attract them, or the geography that we're thinking about.
Yep.
Or alternatively, we've said, there's been a couple of times where we said, instead of hiring someone and assuming that we're going to hire the right person, let's hire 2 or 3 people to do kind of similar stuff, have someone evolve into a leader, and we'll basically have a bigger organization. We might overpay upfront to have multiple people doing something similar, but we plan on growing into it. So we've kind of have a team, and we have established roles. So we've taken some corrective action, but they're certainly not, as you know, again, very well, helping companies like ours and larger hire. There's not a magic formula. I don't believe there's a magic formula anyway, where once you learn from a couple of mistakes, you get it down perfectly after that.
Well, that's a considerably longer conversation. What I would say about that is that there is no matter what you do, no matter what I could teach anyone, you're not going to hire at 100% success. That's just not possible. The goal, I believe the goal should be that you hire it at least at 95%, right? And there are ways to minimize your loss, right? And like I said, it's a much longer conversation, but it's just partly a lot of founders just sort of hunt and peck their way through it, as we've talked about. Or they pick up a book, as you had mentioned in an earlier call. With all due respect to one of the books that you mentioned, neither of those people have ever have never sat where I sat for 29 years, right?
Sure. And certainly,
they never picked up a phone and called a candidate. They never picked up a phone and, they never sat down and wrote a position description, with the company. They never asked the question, well, can you actually attract the person that we're describing?
Right.
Which you mentioned, right?
Yeah,
so my issue with books, even though I've got one coming out, but it's not really a how to do this book, is there's no interaction with a book.
Yeah.
Right. So
I think one of the underappreciated parts of the hiring process, especially when you're growing, is when you identify someone great to then land them. Because I think that's a mistake that I've seen, made both at the corporate level and here, where you find a great candidate, you make a decision, and you say, and maybe they don't come back and go, oh, great, I'm ecstatic to start. When can I start? But it becomes a negotiation. You can lose some momentum there. But if you found a great candidate, get them in-house, get them started quickly, get them trained. Because again, even as you said, the target should be a 95% success rate.
That's right.
You either want them doing the work that you want them doing, and if you find someone great, you want them doing that work. Or again, there's gonna be times that it doesn't work, and you want to move on quicker. So starting the process over, or delaying the process, or going after a second candidate can work. It's worked for me here. It's worked for me elsewhere. But the odds are probably not as good as if you land that first candidate that you've defined as number one.
Well, or when you talk about, the first candidate or going after a second, people saying, interviewing one guy or one gal, right? One individual, and thinking, well, this person is fantastic. And in fact, I'll never forget that happened to me. In a search some time ago when I was still doing that work. And the first candidate I sent in was the candidate they subsequently hired. And the stakeholder says to me, well, do you have anybody else? I said, well, here's the challenges I'm having. Right. And they went through all those challenges. I did subsequently find them one other candidate or maybe two. But I said, this is the problem. When you see the best candidate first, I mean, my feeling is if that candidate fits all your criteria, if we really are clear on what we need, then you better go after that candidate. You don't want, you can lose that person by saying, yeah, we want to see 3 or 4 people.
Yep.
In a perfect world, that's the way it should be. But sometimes that just does. We do not live in a perfect world. Sometimes that happens.
Yeah. What are the odds in the world of billions of people? But hey, it can happen.
Well, it can. So yeah, that's really great. So, and then of course, closing people is not as easy as you think it is, right?
Yep.
And a lot of founders, I think, they really don't. They don't know the right questions to ask along the way to make sure they're qualifying the person, because a lot of founders aren't salespeople.
Yep.
So they're not used to that sort of constantly qualifying somebody and asking questions and how can I solve your problems and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's a
great way of thinking about it. I mean, it is a two-way sales job. The many times I've been a candidate throughout my prior career, the many times I've been a candidate, I've typically gone for jobs where they're hiring one person. I know there's jobs where they're hiring 2 or 3 or 10, or Amazon's hiring hundreds at a time. But I've gone for jobs where they're hiring one person. And everyone always says, "Oh, it's a two-way street, the interview," but it really isn't until the very end.
That's
so it's
correct.
A two-way. They are going to either give me a chance for my opinion to matter or not.
That's right.
So my job is to sell them as a candidate. But all of a sudden, as soon as they select me, all of a sudden it becomes a two-way street, or the street reverses course, and all of a sudden I get to put it on them. And so their job really isn't to impress me the whole time. It is to choose me or someone else as a candidate. But then if they haven't impressed me, all of a sudden I get my chance to ask questions. Maybe I do walk away. Maybe I do have a job right now. Maybe I do have a competing offer, and I'm not even interested to ask you questions because I didn't like how it went. So yeah, it is an interesting
that's so
process.
Great. I mean, a lot of founders. You're not a kid. Maybe that's part of it. That you've been around long enough to understand that an interview is really just like a high-level sales call, right? You as the candidate, your job is to ask smart questions geared around what you can do for them, not what they can do for you. Sell.
Yep.
And those tables are not turned, and you pointed that out, and I was thrilled to hear that from you. Those tables do not turn until at which point they want to hire you. They decide they want to hire you. Now they have to answer your questions.
Yep.
Right.
Life is a sales call.
That's right. That's really great. So, what do you do on your time off? We both live in America, what I refer to as America's playground.
Yeah. Well, as you said, we both live in Colorado. I love when the snow falls. I love doing everything outdoors. I love winter personally. Big into snowboarding, snowshoeing, anything involving winter and the beautiful dry weather and the being in a snow globe here in Colorado is my favorite. Play tennis in summer terribly. A lot of losing tennis matches in summer. I have a family, so I love spending time with my wife and 2 kids and our puppy. I'd say that's a big majority of it.
Fantastic. So finally, if someone listening to this podcast says, well, this is a pretty interesting idea these guys have, I'd be interested in investigating working for them, what would you suggest they do?
Well, I guess give me a call. We'll talk through it. I'll probably spend a lot of time discouraging you and telling you why it doesn't make sense. And if there's really some passion and interest for a good reason, we can figure out what might be the right fit or the right role or the right reasons or what to do next or what else to explore to take a look either at this or the industry or technology or startups, whatever it might be.
And how does someone reach you, or where is the appropriate place for them to reach you?
Yep. So you can contact us at 833-GREETLY. I'm at extension 303, or Dave@greetly.com, TLY.
Well, fantastic. Well, Dave Milliken, founder and CEO of Greetly, this has really been an enjoyable conversation. We had a couple of attempts to get this done and had technical errors. So
yes,
I'm thrilled to have finally actually had a whole conversation with you. It's really been nice talking with you. Thank you.
It was absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Authentically Successful. If you are a successful founder or CEO who would like to be on this program, please visit verticalelevation.com/podcast/apply. If you learned something from this interview and it made a difference, please share it on LinkedIn or Twitter. You can also do a quick screenshot with your phone and text it to a friend. And if you know of someone who would be a great guest, tag them on LinkedIn or Twitter to let them know about the show and include the hashtag Authentically Successful. I love seeing your posts and great suggestions. Lastly, we are regularly putting out new episodes and content. And to make sure you don't miss any episodes, please subscribe. Your thumbs up, ratings, and reviews go a long way to help promote the show and mean a lot to me and my team. If you want to know more, go to our website, verticalelevation.com, or follow me on LinkedIn. This is Carol Schultz. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.